working? Yes, all right. Excellent. So thank you again. It's good to be here back on stage. And yes, so my name is Douglas. Last time I think I didn't really introduce our company, so I wanted to just take a second to do that. AdAlliance is the RTL Group's international media solutions and insights arm. And we help companies ultimately make their way across Europe and help them navigate that media landscape. And we help companies grow there as well as with our assets here in the States. It is my pleasure to be here with you, Lori and Alyssa, and to talk about you and also the journey that Quest Diagnostics has been in as it has transformed its business. I'd love to maybe, if you could, each one of you maybe introduce yourselves, that would be great, and tell me a little bit about your background, as I believe that your background is really, you were really sort of handpicked and I can't imagine someone, more suitable to help Quest, undergo the transformation that it's undergoing. So, please.
Hi, again, I'm Norian, and my background really is in consumer marketing. I also have a special distinction of I have a couple of degrees in biology. So I started my career though in food and CPG, and then I moved over to OTC, and then eventually I made my way to Quest Diagnostics, so really moving into the diagnostics laboratory space. What's really interesting though is when you think about what we're trying to do at Quest, which is transform from a B2B to a B2C company, we really wanted to look outside to bring that outside perspective in and really bring marketers that had a really strong voice of consumer and really understood the consumer landscape so that we could help transform the company.
Hi, Alyssa Waxenberg. I lead the consumer digital experience. So the launching of coming from a B2B to a direct-to-consumer business, like Lori said, we really didn't have that internally. And so my background is I was in hospitality, I've been in retail, I've been in the tech space, and so bringing all of that so that we could create a direct-to-consumer business where, health enthusiasts that we've been talking about, all day today can directly buy testing and learn more about their health through this new area that we've launched in the last year, which is questhealth.com, is part of this change from, we all know Quest Diagnostics, if your doctor sends you, to go get testing, but how can you take on a more active role in your health and knowledge about that? And Lori can tell you a lot about what we learned there with our consumers.
In fact, I would love for you to tell me, Lori, about why it is that you made this transition. I mean, why go from B2B to B2C? Why now? What did you find? What consumer insight, what industry trends were you observing?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When you first get to Quest Diagnostics, right, you think about it, it is a massive, huge brand, but it really doesn't stand for anything in your mind, right? So just, coming into it, that was one of the things as a marketer that was really appealing to me, like the chance to make it stand for something in consumers' minds. So as we got into, looking at this transformation of how do we now talk to consumers, we did a lot of research. So we did, we did a brand new segmentation, we did a lot of insight work, we did a lot of messaging work. We actually developed a whole new brand expression so that we were making sure that how we were talking to consumers is actually different than how we were talking to our professional audiences. So making sure that it was really personalized. So if you look from an outside in, right, what else is happening in all these other categories? You're expecting, again, personalization, you're expecting convenience, you're expecting transparency and the ability to understand sort of where you are in a journey. So healthcare, when you think about it, it's actually not very transparent, right? A lot of times, you're relying on an expert who's maybe sending you for some testing. You don't know with your insurance how much it's going to cost, where you're going to end up, how long it's going to take. There's a lot of unknowns. So something that we really tapped into from a consumer perspective was making sure that we are bringing what I'll call these modern expectations into the experience, right? So that you have, again, full transparency, it's personalized, it's just a more convenient experience end to end, and we wanted to make sure that the ease of that came through to the consumer.
How did you have to, maybe you can tell us, Alyssa, transform, create that experience digitally for the consumer? What does that look like? How did you transform it?
I mean, today, most of the experience that any of us have is through your, the Epic or, those apps that you get, from your doctor or your hospital to go in and you might see your test results in there. But because we wanted to, as you said, bring that digital experience and also allow consumers to be able to interact directly, is we had to do the same thing. We had to take all of the principles that we've employed in other industries. And so the reason of coming from hospitality and launching hotel apps and retail stores and buy online, pick up in store, is we had to take those core principles. How do you make a cart? We didn't have someone, anything where people could buy their own product. How do we even take explaining these categories? So I'm sure it's the Vitamin Shoppe we heard this morning, like these health experts who are helping you decode, what are all these vitamins and minerals. Imagine trying to read what a test type is and understand what that is. A lot of what we were learning about is how do you make that language that people can understand, make it relatable, make it for a website, make it for mobile, make it small, make it bullets, that people can understand. And so it was really taking a full step back and educating not only what we were building externally, but consumers, patients inside Quest were really just an end point, right, through a doctor. So we had to even just explain to people, like, you're asking a lot of things that you're used to talking to a professional, and so they can decode that, and how do we actually go back and say, how would a consumer understand this, and how did they come to this brand with all the expectations that they have from Starbucks, and, Amazon packages coming, the transparency, Lori, one is like, how do you know when your test results are going to be ready, right? That's an anxious moment for people after they've gone to the labs. And so these are all the things we've been working on that weren't relevant to a B2B business, but are core principles now to help make that transition of thinking about a consumer related directly to Quest and not through an intermediary.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's in fact a reimagining really of the entire experience, user experience. Can you tell us a little bit about where are we in time in terms of consumer? You talked about how consumer health expectations and needs have changed. Yeah, we'd love to hear that.
No, absolutely. I could talk for hours on this. So what we're really seeing though, right, is when you think about the relationship that you have with your health and wellness, it used to be really symptomatic driven, and now we're moving to a place where it's much more proactive driven. So we're working, to make sure that we're keeping pace with consumers on that journey. We also know that there's a lot more information out there, and so you have all different types of consumers. You have the consumers that are really going to go out and find that knowledge and be very well educated. You also have consumers still that completely believe in their doctor, and honestly, they won't do anything without their doctor telling them to. You have another set of consumers that honestly don't really think their doctor's quite on top of everything, and they know that they can bring more to the table. So as we think about all these different consumers, right, we need to make sure that we are having our products be able to match where they are on their journey. And a lot of what we're doing to bring innovation to the space is really in this notion of proactive health. So, consumers are changing their diet, they're taking different vitamins and supplements, they're working out in different ways, but they really don't know what that's doing to their body. So we're continuously launching new types of products that then actually help them decode that for themselves. So they can go online, they can purchase a test, they can say, hey, this keto diet, am I really getting all the right nutrients, if I'm following this strictly? Where might I need to supplement? We have that, that ability now to have that control and to have that knowledge. And the other thing that's really great about where we are from a process standpoint with consumers and their journey is it's all about, again, speed and convenience and ease, right? Honestly, trying to get a doctor's appointment at this day and age, it's not so easy, right? Like, telehealth is certainly helping, but a lot of times if you want to go in and see your physician, it takes a couple of months to get an appointment, and a lot of times you want an answer sooner than that. So part of what this unlocks is being able to have a more informative conversation with your healthcare professional and your care team so that you can go in and actually start the conversation like one step ahead.
It seems to me that you're essentially looking to be the dashboard of your health, right? This is the place that I go to and I see exactly sort of, as you said, how is my health in so many dimensions, but it is like the one place that is hosting it because it's also the place where I can get continuity, right? So it's hard. We all go get a physical, right? But that happens once a year, or we are not being proactive, but as you rather reactive and going when there's a problem. So having the ability to kind of map and understand the development of your values and your health is something that seems like right on point with what the consumer wants and needs. No?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that we're trying to again make this more of a way that people can think about that in exactly what you're saying. So if you think about the fact that diagnostics, right, testing is sort of at the core of not just reacting, but knowing how you might be able to do something proactively about your health. Or we have a lot of athletes and people who are monitoring themselves, right? So they're looking for how do they get to peak performance. We're trying to help people understand that is sort of your personal health history. And if you have it in with different doctors and specialists and in different places, right? This is a place where you can then bring all of those together and how we can be that linkage across your care team. Of course, people have different doctors and different, outlets that they use to support their health, but having it all in one place allows you to be able to then share that with all of them, as well as being able to track that over time, right? So if you have a cholesterol problem or diabetes or some of these things that are chronic even, you can use the monitoring that we have and then be able to see how what you're doing and the influence that you have and how that's tracking. And we're also trying to move as we move, we're very early in our journey. Our consumer division is only 2 years old, 3 years old. Is how do we then take that? The biggest thing we hear from consumers after they get their testing is, well, what do I do now? And so of course you're always supposed to, talk to a professional about that and make decisions, but we want to get into that educational space, right? How do you help people understand, I get a test result, what does this mean? How do I translate this? What actions can I take? And so we're really trying to build that experience all into one place that they really own it, and they can use it as they go through their journey and share it with the relevant people helping them with their care.
I'd love to hear a little bit about, so how else do you think that you will, you hope to plug into the ecosystem, with other providers and beginning to provide some other services yourself to be, provide a more holistic approach to health and well-being?
Yeah, so it's really about, again, meeting the consumer where they are. So we're constantly looking at, partnerships and how do we feed data to, say, something like an Apple Health or, Android systems, things like that. But then also making sure, to Alyssa's point, that consumers have a place to go to look at their personal health history. So as they build that up over time and they go back in and they see these changes in trends, we've got really easy ways for them to then send that to members of their care team, be able to ask questions, and so it just sort of comes full circle.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can tell us, diagnostics is a very broad field. Like, what are the most popular, how do you call it, tests that people are getting? Maybe you can kind of give us, maybe by audience segment, if you will, kind of give us a little bit of a flavor. What kind of people, how is it going? This change, have people embracing, for example, this new D2C product? And then two, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, what are some of the more popular products and tests, if you will, within your offering?
Sure, yeah. So, of course, there are very basic tests, right, that people are really interested in, what's my blood type? Let's take a very simple one, right? It's actually astounding, right? A lot of people don't know their blood types, right? How many people never know their blood type, for sure? Yeah, right? Okay. So again, it's
don't.
Yep, right, no, right, right, that's what I'm saying. So it's a very, honestly, it's an inexpensive test. You can go online, you can get it, and then you know your blood type. And actually, that's really powerful information that honestly everybody should know. But what we do see is, so beyond what I'll call some of those basic interest tests, honestly, STD testing, because it's private, it's convenient, you don't have to share the result with anybody but yourself. STD testing, right out of the gate, sort of sells itself. And then we often talk about the fact that people put off their annual physicals, and basically when you go, one of the most important things about your annual physical is your blood testing that they do. So we offer basically something that's equivalent to the annual physical, and so a lot of people will do that because, again, maybe they don't want to go to the doctor, maybe it's inconvenient for them, maybe their copay is too high, and they go ahead and they just can purchase the test online. So we see that. We also have a number of really interesting categories that bubble up, like tuberculosis testing, honestly, has been peaking recently, right? So that's something that's interesting. And as we look at the nutritional profiles, because there's so much interest about, again, performance and nutrition, those tend to pop as well.
Yeah, that's really really, really interesting. Using, of course, obviously being able to, on demand, what we see today in our society, being able to test for that easily makes a lot of sense instead of, making a scheduling. This is exactly one of the pain points, right? As you said, scheduling an appointment, like, 2 months, whereas Quest Diagnostics, today or tomorrow I can go and get that checked out. And ultimately it's, from my perspective, I see two things, right? Helping consumers lead, a more healthy life, and hopefully, impacting, their longevity, and at the same time just giving people peace of mind. A lot of, testing, what it does is it gives peace of mind. I did not work for Quest, but it really does. So, and I think being able to make that easily accessible, and having, I think, the trust that you do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, trust, why, how Quest has built, trust over the years, and why it's so important in the diagnostics and health space as a whole.
Yeah, I think one of the things in partnership together when we were launching this new, division was the fact that we do benefit from the trust that Quest has, right? There's a lot of new, the Google, Dr. Google that people talk about is, even though they go look, they're still a little nervous, right? They don't know. So Quest itself has that, we touched, I think, 2 out of 3, right, consumers, across our network because of all the people that we support, hospitals, doctors, et cetera. So building on that brand, and that was why it was so important in how we translated, how we communicate to you, was, we benefit from the knowledge of the brand and the trust and the history, but then how do we make it so that you feel confident? That's been a lot of the work, is like, if I don't have a doctor telling me I should go get this test, how are we leading you through that journey to help make sure you understand what a test is for, help you understand what the benefits, of the results that you might get out of it, what you might do next, because we want to empower, people to be knowledgeable about their health, to be confident in being able to interact with us, and then to, have that information and be able to go next steps and what they should do with it.
And I'll just add one thing on that too. So one of the things is, again, Quest Diagnostics is, a leader in the diagnostics laboratory space, and people are comfortable with that and they understand that. And the tests that we're actually running for consumers are the same tests that as if your doctor had ordered it, right? Or the same quality of test. So it's not that you're getting something that maybe your doctor is not going to believe at the end of the day. It is exactly what your doctor would have ordered. So it's a much easier conversation, because sometimes, again, there are, digitally native companies in the diagnostic space, and they offer testing, but it's not always like the same type of testing, right? It's not necessarily equivalent to, in all cases, what you would have gotten a test panel ordered if your doctor had done it. So there's that level of it as well, where there's a certain trust that comes with the fact that it's a company that you have been using for many, many years, and now you're actually just accessing the services in a different way.
Excellent. As you've got, you're still on this journey, in this transformation. Maybe you can share a little bit about what are some of the sort of challenges, that you faced, as you internally had to, sort of, change that, shift, a direction, because I can imagine, there is, culture, structures. How did that? Can you tell us a little bit about that? What were some of the challenges that you found along the way, and solutions, and maybe some that you're still figuring out?
Sure, I'll start with that. So yeah, consumer, obviously, it's not that we've just only been in existence for 2 years at Quest, right? It always, it bubbles up, it gets some support, but because of the way that we're structured, it was always, a small part of like the marketing team's effort. So where it really exploded is, honestly, we started to think about it as its own unique group, and we actually ended up having to move it into a separate division, because when it's in a separate division, then it can get the time, attention, focus, sort of dollars that it needs in order to thrive. When it was part of, the master brand Quest Diagnostics, it's hard then when you're looking at sort of priorities over all of the different things that we're doing. When you think about, all of our different clients, consumer is one of 5 major client groups that we talk about. There's hospitals, there's payers, there's, health plans. I mean, it gets complicated. So really one of the unlocks, honestly, was building the team and getting enough momentum, and then being able to separate it out into a separate unit or division so that it can actually have enough focus within the company.
And then I would say on the digital side, it was literally like building a startup from the ground up, because everything that we had was homegrown legacy systems geared towards an insurance-based, clinician-oriented business, right? So even when we said if we're going to do this, some of it's organizational, is you have to give us the tools to be a modern, e-commerce business. And so that meant, doing full stack technology build. It was transformation internally of just how we do things. And then it was a lot of even just spending time with, compliance and legal, and who have their role, which is always to make sure that, we're doing the right thing for consumers. But it's very different when you want to be able to write language, for example, that is accessible to somebody. They want it to be technically perfect, right? Like everything has to be in detail. So even just little things like that, and trying to say like, wait, we all know it's because we're used to talking to people in like the shorthand of medical language. Consumer doesn't understand that. Changing out how we're not insurance, we're just taking credit cards like if you were going to buy a T-shirt, right? So that was a whole other thing that we just had to literally explain and go, work with finance, and it was a whole different business than what the bedrock is of Quest. So all of these things, even though it seems like it's so obvious, if you look at all the other ways we as consumers interact with other brands, when it's internal to changing a company that never had to work that way, all of it feels new, even though you can relate to it in your own personal life. So we had a lot of those things you had to work through to get to the way we are today.
Excellent. And now, as a media company, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how you got the word out actually to consumers, and how that effort is coming along.
Yeah, so it was actually really great. So we worked very closely with our agency partners, and we had a wonderful launch campaign. And it's basically put your blank to the test, right? And then the ad spot cycle through and show all sorts of, it's your heart, it's, whatever. But it's really wonderful. We did a lot of out of home, we did a lot of media, and honestly, now we do a lot on digital, right? Obviously, a lot of people are searching for this. It's still a lot that can be done in terms of capturing folks that have that intent and then going back and building additional intent.
Wonderful. How do you see other, competition starting to sort of rile up, and then how do you, begin to protect? Because obviously it's a great space. So how do you build something that will, you'll continue to really be the leader in that space?
So a lot of it is about what we're offering, right? So right now we're at like 75 plus tests. A couple months ago we were at 50 plus tests. So we continuously are innovating and making sure that as we see trends and as we see spaces that consumers want to understand more about, that we are making those tests accessible to them. So I think part of our just inherent competitive advantage is that we have a tremendous test list that comes, from Quest Diagnostics years in this space. And what we do then is we marry that with the trends that we see, and then we bring those out on our direct-to-consumer site and make sure that we're staying, as topical and as relevant as possible. So from a competition standpoint, where it might take them many years to develop those types of testing and that type of breadth of portfolio, we can actually do that. We can actually be very choiceful about what we're bringing to market when.
And that brings me, I think, to another question, which is, so you've talked about, increasing the breadth of products. What is next for you guys? I mean, how do we go from,
Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'll take this one again. So yeah, we actually just like last week announced we now have a new genetics test that's offered on the site, which is really wonderful. It's talking again about not looking at reactive, but being proactive. What are your risk factors for heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer, other cancers, right? And it's a very easy way for consumers. That product is actually a test kit that gets sent to your house. So you just, you do the collection in the privacy of your home, you send it back via FedEx, and you can then understand these risk factors. And what we talked about before is, you have the opportunity not only for to speak to a genetic counselor if your results, take you down that path, but you then also can, do additional, research and look at the resources that we have. Maybe you want to make a lifestyle change because you have a risk factor. Maybe the next time you get a symptom, you're going to connect it with a risk factor and then actually be, more likely to talk to your healthcare professional. So all these things that we can do to actually help consumers, lead healthier lives and have better outcomes, it really all starts with understanding the signals that your body is already sending to you. And you need to just, decode those. And there's lots of different offerings that we have that help you do that. I would say check out the genetics test because it's a really interesting offering.
And then I'll just add, can I say one thing? I think, and then in the delivery of it, we are basically taking that approach of how we're getting into the omni-channel, right? We have 3,000 labs across the country, so we're pretty much in everybody's neighborhood to go where you've been to for your doctor, but things like an STD test, things like people wanting to do things where in the convenience of their home, we're all busy, right, and more people are home, we're starting to launch and partner with third parties to launch home kits where it makes sense. So the ability to, whether it's, go through your doctor, go yourself to, a lab and get an appointment yourself, or to be able to have these newer tests that we're starting to bring in, which is bringing it to the convenience of your home, launching mobile. I was equated to like the mobile groomer that comes to your house. We've got mobile phlebotomists who will come if in certain areas and do the test right in your driveway. So the more we can offer the broad test that Lori mentioned, right, in many categories, we're also trying to make it so that we can meet you just like you would in other brands in different channels, so that you can get access to this information and these tests in the way that makes sense for you in many different ways.
You guys are really kind of pushing the envelope in terms of what is really, the next frontier, bringing testing even to your home. I mean, mobile phlebotomist, that's incredible. And I say this meaningfully, knowledge is power. I think as some of those who have, lost people to diseases where we might have had, this kind of intelligence early enough, and had we started out proactively enough, we realize how powerful it is. And this is a wonderful way of democratizing that. So I think Quest it's a great business opportunity, but it's also a great good, I think, for humanity and our longevity. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one question. We got a question here.
Gary Benstock, Colgate Palmolive. Thank you. I'm just curious, when I go to the doctor, they're taking like 3 or 4 vials of blood. We know where Theranos went. That was a cool idea, but not good execution. So are you looking at new ways, either saliva or some other ways to limit the amounts? And how do you do blood testing from home?
So there are a lot of different, specimen collection methods, right? And then depending on the type of equipment that it's run on, sort of like dictates, right? Like what needs to be collected. There are companies that we partner with that are looking at sort of novel collection devices in terms of, being able to extract, again, smaller amounts of, say, blood or other types of specimens. And the kits are all different in terms of what they're collecting, right? Like a lot of times there's swabs. If you think about, COVID, everybody got familiar with swabbing, so a number of the at-home kits are like swab-based. But there are definitely partners that we collaborate with that have collection devices that don't require as much blood collection from home.